Cuckoo! I'm Hexed. Welcome to Hexed History, where we explore Paris through art, history, crafting, and disability. I'm a big fan of museums in general, and I was fortunate enough to grow up in big cities with excellent museums. In the summer of 2003, I survived a brutal heat wave here in Europe by going to one of the few places with air conditioning, the Louvre. Side note, air conditioning just isn't much of a thing here, although with climate change it's rapidly becoming more important. Hi, Binks. So, it's still not standard for apartments to have air conditioning. Ours doesn't. But it does have a cat. Hi, Binks. It's been one of my regular haunts since moving back to Paris in January of 2021. Today, I'm taking inspiration from a 15th century Iranian mosaic called Étoiles et décors végétales stylisés, that is, star with stylized plant decoration. On y va! So, one of the things I would like to do on this channel is to visit the entire Louvre bit by bit, room by room, and try to recreate items, whether replicas or my own interpretation of something in a painting. I thought I would start by going room by room to look for inspiration. Fun fact, the Louvre has nearly all of its massive collection online. If you know where to go looking, you can actually navigate an interactive map room by room and see what items are on display. You can then click on an individual item to learn more about it. It helps, of course, to speak French, but if not, I recommend running translations through DeepL. It tends to be more nuanced and accurate than the other translation sites I've encountered. Room 101 is actually part of the Petite Galerie du Louvre, one of the areas where they have visiting collections and rotating displays. I didn't have to scroll far to find this mosaic star, which immediately caught my eye. I decided that this would be my inspiration. Now, I live in a small Paris apartment with my spouse and our 4 cats. So it's not exactly practical for me to do certain types of art. Mosaics can be fun, but if I were to attempt this, it would really require enamel work rather than just the type you might make as a kid with small glazed tiles or maybe broken glass. I do not have the kiln or the space for such art. So the original plan was to do this as embroidery. I recorded a bunch. I was doing all this really fine detail work and I hated it. It was not good. It was very frustrating, and I'm not bad at embroidery, but I would have needed to do a much bigger piece, which would have taken so much time. So scratch that and decided to go with watercolor. I used 250 grams per meter squared, 115 pound, grained paper from Clairefontaine in A5 size. As you can see, I started off by drawing some circles, then a lot of lines in an effort to create a grid. I used a similar grid on my reference photo, but still managed to distort the final shapes a bit. I did try to trace it, but the weight of the paper was too thick to see through. Once I was reasonably satisfied with the pencil, I switched to ink. I did test several different inking pens on a scrap piece of the same type of paper first. I knew I was going to be working with watercolor, so water fastness was critical. Normally, my Staedtler pigment liner pens work well for this, but my fine point Sharpie ended up winning the battle on this one, much to my surprise. Since I didn't necessarily need a variety of line thicknesses, this worked out just fine. I set to work inking and eventually finished up late in the evening. This meant the line work was thoroughly dry before I started painting. Okay, I knew I had oversqueezed the paints, but it had been a long time since I'd used gouache, and I had forgotten exactly how potent they actually are. Gouache is basically super dense watercolor. I also only had the 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, as well as black and white. You can make just about every color with these, but I think I might go get a few more, so I have the basic color wheel covered at least. Painting this in was definitely an interesting experience. The muscle memory for my painting skills is definitely still there, but oof, I was rusty on my watercolor usage. Even though I have a lot of critiques of my painting here, I mean, the line work at the end, it's sloppy. Still, for a basic return to watercolor painting, I'm reasonably happy with how it turned out. Even if I did realize at some point in the process that I had turned the whole thing 45 degrees from how it's displayed. Time to take it to the Louvre. The bus nearest to our apartment runs directly up to the Louvre. I prefer the bus because I'm disabled. I don't have a right kneecap for starters, and doing stairs in the metro is really hard on me. I was having a pretty solid day overall, so I opted to borrow one of the walkers available throughout the museum instead of a wheelchair. I still had to use lifts to get around, but this at least gave me some flexibility. Once I got inside, I beelined for the exhibition, which is titled The Splendors of Uzbekistan's Oases. It was a really good exhibition and quite interesting, exploring the history of the Uzbeki, cultural influences and exposures, and development of different arts. It closes the 6th of March of 2023, so if you happen to be here in the next few days, do go check it out. I made my way through the exposition, keeping an eye out for my piece. Finally, I spotted it. Even though I had seen the dimensions online, I was still really impressed with how big it was. One of the gallery attendants was also nice enough to take this photo of me showing off the piece. I then explored the rest of the exhibition, admiring some very old fabric in particular, before heading out to the rest of the museum. After all, I was already there. Why waste the opportunity? Overall, I had a really good time getting back into watercolor. I definitely want to do more of that in the future. It was also really cool to get to see my piece next to the original. Well, thank you so much for coming with me today on this journey. If you would like to see more content like this, then go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons. Hit the bell if you want to take your chance with getting alerts. Maybe leave a comment with a suggestion for my next project. Should I paint something again? Maybe recreate a piece of clothing from a painting? Design a Venus de Milo tattoo? Create a piece of jewelry from a Roman statue? Do my hair? Well, I don't have much hair, so maybe we'll skip the hairstyles one. I'd love to hear your ideas. And if you want a little slow tube, check out the companion video where it's just creating the art. No time lapse, no talking. À bientôt mes amis!